Hello there. Welcome to day 133 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today, continuing the producer/fiancée Helen theme of films that she wants me to see, I am delving into a bit of 80s pop nostalgia with the dance film Dirty Dancing. Dirty Dancing, of course, being one of those films that, and I think it's primarily an 80s thing more than any other decade, because that's really when pop movies really were the most prominent, possibly because of the rise of VHS. But films that really entered the zeitgeist of culture to the point where you felt like you didn't need to see a certain film because it was so prevalent that, everyone knows the quote, "You don't put baby in the corner." It's so just intrinsic to, like, anyone who knows anything about film knows that quote and thinks they know Dirty Dancing. And of course I went in thinking, okay, well, this is going to be a dance film, obviously. Initially I thought it was a musical. I don't know why I thought it was a musical. Possibly because, again, like a lot of the films of this week, musicality is really important. There is something about the sense of using music to create an atmosphere and a time and place, and this film really knows how to do that. And so consequently, now that film does it in a jukebox sense, so of course using pop music from the 80s and of course music from the 60s to create that sense of atmosphere. But consequently, in my mind, I had it as a musical, but I was wrong. But yeah, and so I kind of went in with certain existing expectations, and I was a little hostile towards the film. I suppose partly because it does one of the cardinal sins that makes me very is at least the first red flag, which is the 80s nostalgia film. Sorry, I suppose the 80s, 60s or 50s nostalgia film. So of course there was the I suppose the 80s is really the first point in which the 30-year cycle in terms of cinema really began to take effect. Because, of course, you had films like Grease, Back to the Future, and this, that really were celebrating a culture of that time through different narrative devices. And that has continued through to this day. And so I kind of went in, and I'm not the biggest fan of the 80s, 50s, or 60s film. I'm afraid to say I am not a big fan of Grease. It's not one. It is one of those ones that people love, and it doesn't click with me. Frankly, I thought I had the same feelings about Back to the Future, but, well, I'll explain shortly what slightly helped that. And then this, of course, going in thinking, oh, it's going to be a big nostalgia fest. And the problem I suppose I had was, and do continue to have, I suppose, is that it's nostalgic from a culture that I didn't live in. Of course, I was born in the 90s, about a time that, of course, I had no bearing on. And so it's so in the midst of history to me that I have no emotional attachment to the time period. And that doesn't mean, people can't still have that same feeling, but for me, I have no relationship to it. And so I was going into this thinking, oh, it's going to be another love letter to a period of history, and I'm not going to relate to that love letter. To my surprise, I have to say, despite all I've said about preconceived ideas, about the nostalgia fest, about my relationship to the 80s and the 60s and the 50s and that sort of style, actually did a lot of things right, a lot of very impressive things. Um, it's just that, as I say, partly I have to credit the musicality of it, the sense that where dance is just in every moment of it. Even, as I said yesterday, um, even scenes, as I said yesterday with Chicago, even scenes where there isn't any dancing place taking place, you just feel that sense of dance within the air, within the ether of it, and it really does again have a really strong set of characters, and of course, and with really distinct identities. Where initially I was going in and I was thinking, oh, it's doing the deer hunter thing, and I was again another red flag for me, where it just drops you into. It doesn't give you that sense of, oh, this is a frame scene, these are the characters, they're going to have a conversation. It was very much an atmosphere style to begin with, where you're just getting scenes of different characters interacting. We do get that sense of voiceover to begin with from Jennifer Grey, who plays Baby, but it it then sort of drops you in a series of just events that are taking place. The family arriving, the atmosphere of the holiday camp, and you're just a bit like, I don't know. It's a bit like, oh, okay, I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of character work here. Whether it's just going to lead into a dance sequence and then a little bit of chemistry and then the next dance sequence. But again, to my surprise and to its credit, it sort of threw you in, but then slowed down as a film to allow you to really click with the characters. I think it really wanted to establish a setting, a time, and a place, then introduce you to characters and dynamics, and create that sense of class that really didn't that I thought was a really prominent theme within the film. I think, thinking on that nostalgia fest thing and the issues I had with it, the thing I appreciate very strongly about this film, and it does it from the off, is the fact that it's not a love letter to a certain period like, say, Grease or Back to the Future is. It's more of a acknowledgement of the ending of an era. And I suppose, as I've gone through this discussion, the issue I've constantly been jumping back and forth between saying, 50s and 60s, and how the 30-year cycle should apply to the 50s if it's made in the 80s. However, what I appreciate about the film, what it does is, this is set in 63, and what the film is trying to establish is the ending of an era, the acknowledgement that a time and place, that a lifestyle is coming to an end, both good and bad. And it opens with Baby's narration about the point in her life where she's going through the transition of coming of age, of no longer being her daddy's little girl, but becoming a woman in her own right. But similarly, she acknowledges retrospectively through the voiceover that this was also the end of a certain time because of events like the assassination of JFK, and that the lifestyle that really the 50s was prominent in the 50s is now coming to its end, and the 60s is going to overtake it. And that's very much through the film, the idea that the ideals of people with the 60s and those who, the culture of the cross culture of it, the different classes are now in a new decade with new ideas. And of course, you have characters who still hold to those old ideals, like the holiday owner, the owner and his son. But the idea is that they are becoming increasingly irrelevant, and in fact, the holiday camp itself sort of represents this annoying hangover where you have like the constant announcement of events and puns and the stand-up comedian, and it sort of shows a certain datedness and a sense of, oh well, this is really being replaced with, of course, the dancers and the sexuality and the some aspects are going away, like the class aspect that's really prominent in the film, but others, like the kookiness of it, the chocolate box sort of nature of it, are also going along with it. And the film as well, I have to say, really, it's something that I should credit Grease with, and a film that has made me want. I've heard about Saturday Night Live, which has been on one of my lists. What?
Saturday Night Fever.
Sunday Night Fever. Sorry, Saturday Night Live is the comedy series. The Saturday Night Fever is the idea that this film, though it does have a certain fantasy element to it, it is set in the real world, and it tries to address real issues, particularly with the Penny's abortion and the handling of that. The fact that, of course, even in 1987 it was illegal, and yet the film doesn't present it through judgment. It doesn't present it in any way that we're supposed to feel something about the morality of it. It just simply is something that's happening, and we as an audience have to go with that, which I think is very forward thinking and mature, and again it shows a certain class divide over that. The idea, there's something very upstairs downstairs about it, the idea of like higher class servants taking advantage of lower class servants, and then sort of disposing of them when they no longer the fun is over, and the idea of, oh, how does one survive that? And again, it has that same sense of, okay, people have to do what they have to do to survive, particularly the character of Johnny. I mean, I have to say, this film is incredibly rich with. It's very much about masculinity in a very mature way, in a way that even to this day we don't get many films about masculinity and the different levels of masculinity. In quite a well done way, because we have the character of Johnny being this, tough looking. You think from a distance that, oh, he's always fooling around with different women, and of course he's sexy but aloof and has that slight aggression, and you have a certain conception of him, and yet actually what you discover over the course of the film is he's actually an incredibly delicate character. He talks about certain issues he has involving, of course, his the class issue, the wealth issue, the fact that he is, he will go from making lots of money doing this kind of job to making nothing, and the nature of sex, and of course sex and sexuality is a really prominent part of this, but the fact that it talks about the way that he allows women to exploit him, essentially, and it's not presented in a way that somehow he's victimized exactly, but he is being victimized because he believes that these wealthy guests enjoy his company, of course want to have sex with him, and on some level they care about him, but he discovers that they don't, and he is simply an object for them to enjoy whilst on their holiday. And that's quite a subversive idea. It's, even in contemporary narratives, it's often the other way round. So the idea of seeing it from a male perspective is interesting. It's actually quite an untapped narrative. And again, like I said, there's such a sensitivity to his character, and I think what really makes the core of it so strong is where you have of course, the stuff with Baby and with Johnny and them learning to dance together, and of course everyone always remembers the ending with the time of your life. But what you learn over the course of the film is that it's about trust, and of course dancing is about trust and about developing a natural chemistry and finding the rhythms of each other and status relationships. And it's okay, certain moments you have to trust that I am, holding you up, or I am of greater status because I'm leading. And that sort of parallels their relationship as, she is wealthy, but of course she's quite innocent. Now he's more mature, but he's incredibly poor. And you're constantly seeing the sense of mistrust between them, and the fact that they slip into their expectations of each other that are classist and gendered, and the fact that they have to learn to communicate their feelings and at the same time trust each other in a non-verbal way, and that's quite rich, and it's incredibly well written. I mean, what was her name again? Ely Bergman?
Eleanor Bergstein.
Thank you. Sorry, Eleanor Bergstein, the writer of this. Again, it shows such a deft hand in writing this, such an ability to create character and chemistry that, when you get to the end and when you get to the no one puts Baby in the corner moment, which I finally know what that means, which is quite a relief, but it's earned, and you actually feel that powerful moment of union between them and the performance, and yeah, it's such a strong film. It's such a well-crafted, simple, but not basic story. And again, the dancing is just phenomenal. This is, of course, there were dance films that existed before this, but this is definitely the precursor to the modern era of dance movies, like the Step Up films, and you can see why, because it just puts so much energy into dancing without it distracting from narrative, and without it just being, people are just going to dance for no reason. It feels intertwined with the film in a way that makes it essential. Yeah, I think it's a great film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like the video, please hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because all of those help me in the algorithm. Please subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos go up, and I have 130 plus videos, so please do check out some of my back catalogue. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about movies and TV shows and news and funny videos. And of course I upload these videos onto Twitter as they go up. Thank you for joining me. Take care.